Good morning and welcome to What the Tech. I'm Ryan the Lion and got special guests with me, Philip Durrant from Adaptive, and we're going to dig into one of those questions today, what the tech? And the subject is low code, no code. What's the lowdown? So as always, with anything to do with a few quiet yarns, we're going to ask Philip to introduce himself so we can meet the person a bit, as well as the integration developer, the principal architect. So let's kick off with that. Philip, if you can introduce yourself so we get a bit of a picture of who you are out of work, and then a bit of a rundown of the work side as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So as you said, I'm Philip Durrant. I'm at the sharp end of my 30s now. I'm married with one 7-year-old son. And I like to get out and listen to a bit of live music, though it's been a bit challenging with the pandemic. I got a fair few concert refunds through 2020 for acts that were stuck on the wrong side of the Pacific Ocean. I'd like to get out and relax with a bit of console gaming, though again, that seems to be more house maintenance these days than gaming. So I don't quite know how that happened, but I guess that's the way time goes. I still try and squeeze in a bit around the edges, but it's getting more and more challenging. So the backlog of games is growing faster than I can actually play them these days.
To be sure. And hey, look, I'm looking out the window of my home office at my deck, and it is absolutely covered with debris from last night. So in terms of home maintenance, I'm looking at about probably 2 hours of work just to tidy up the stuff that got blown out of the trees around the place, let alone the normal stuff. So yeah, home maintenance, it does suck up a lot of time from the live music and the gaming. If you had one game and one band, what would the top ones be at the moment in terms of the game you want to play and the band you love to hear the most?
At the moment, I'm trying to work my way through the Mass Effect trilogy. They've just released a remaster of that, so I'm going back and playing through that. It's a good nostalgia trip for something that came out in 2007. Trying to relive my youth a bit there, and band. So probably my favourite band and the last band that I managed to see before the borders closed down would be Tool. I managed to just squeak in February 2020 before we all went into lockdown with the closed borders there. So fingers crossed they'll be able to come back to these shores once we open up a bit next year.
Awesome. Well, that sounds pretty good. Pleasure to get a bit of an idea who you are. Now let's crack into the business end of this discussion, which is the lowdown on low code, no code integration. And of course, before we get into the depths of those questions, especially around integration, could you give us an overview of low code, no code? Where does it come from? What are the benefits or the intended benefits? Give us a bit of a foundation for which we can build all these questions into the picture.
Sure. So the concept of low-code and no-code integration follows on from low-code and no-code development in general. So, as I'm sure everyone knows, historically, development, be it integration or just standard development, has been the domain of specialist developers, programmers, what have you. And it's been something that has been of effort and to deliver and has required specialist resources, and that has been a challenge for delivery for companies large and small over time. So obviously the industry has identified that is a problem that can be solved. So through the 2000s, we saw the rise of low-code, no-code development platforms, which are platforms that allow non-specialist people to get in and build their own applications, you may build your own website, build small business apps, deliver all of those and not be beholden to needing to go in and get a developer to build, compile, deploy, distribute all of the traditional tasks, and really cut down and lower the barrier to delivering applications and also enable high productivity for developers. So, we don't necessarily enjoy all of the plumbing work that comes with developing. We're there to solve problems, not do plumbing. So, we also benefit from the low-code tools. So a lot of that can be seen these days in things like Microsoft Power Apps, where non-technical, non-specialist staff can get in and build apps that can solve business problems. It might be an onboarding process, it might be an expense claim process, but a business analyst or a manager can get in and can go in and deliver their requirements, build a small app and get that all up and working without recourse to a professional developer. And that concept has filtered through into the integration domain. So we've moved from the general development domain into the more specialist integration space. And a lot of those same concepts have come across. So rather than using a point-and-click interface to build a UI and put business logic into an application, it's using a point-and-click interface to integrate systems. So you might drag a source system on there that might represent Salesforce, and you click through your wizard and configure your Salesforce connection rather than needing to download an SDK from the Salesforce website and write some code to connect to their APIs. This is all just a multi-step wizard that does all of that for you. And then you might have a destination that is your database where you want to load your sales information. So you go through a multi-step wizard to configure that up. And then you just have a graphical interface that allows you to map the data from Salesforce into your database. All of this can be done without needing to write a line of code, without needing to engage a specialist developer. You can build it, you can deploy it, you can run it using the modern low and no code technologies, and your integrations can be delivered in a much more efficient fashion and delivered with a much lower technical requirement. So it really lowers the bar to participating in the integration space.
So if I can chuck in something, we've been talking about over email back and forth with the team. There's and I was speaking with actually one of your partners, Glenn Archibald. Same thing was back in the day there was bespoke integration, which required bespoke development. Then I think it would have been the reference to middleware came first, and then somewhere between that were connectors, which is what this sounds like. And when I used to sell Salesforce at an organization, then sold Sugar, there were connectors between Sugar and Marketo. Marketo being the marketing automation, Sugar being the CRM. So, the idea was that with the connector, it was just, connect them at these points, literally like my fingers. So the information from one system would go through into the other system, be it your accounts, I don't know, person's name, notes, whatever their actions were on the website, it would all record through. So as a salesperson, you could look in the CRM and go, oh, Philip Durrant from Adaptive has been looking on the Boomi site and has done this and this and this. As a salesperson, I can then pick up the phone and talk to you. So if we're thinking about low code, no code integration now, you've talked about the benefit for productivity, and you've talked about the smaller end. Like if I think about my website's point and click, but you guys deal in enterprise world, so there's a massive gap between me and my little website and the massive enterprise integration stuff that you do. But I take it that the low code, no code is becoming, when you're talking those big names like Salesforce and Boomi, etc., this is really prevalent. Is that fair to say?
Yes, yeah, very much so. It is definitely the direction of the market. As I said, we don't enjoy the plumbing. It gets in the way of what we're trying to do, which is solve problems for people, solve business problems. So You definitely see the leading integration platforms, even the enterprise platforms, are moving towards low code. not only because it lowers the bar, but because it increases productivity. If I'm not having to drop code and manually build connections to systems, then I'm delivering business outcomes for clients. And it just means that I can turn around functionality much faster and more efficiently than we ever used to be able to do with the traditional high code integration platforms of yore. So definitely.
Oh, sorry. You finish.
Yeah, definitely it is something that that we are seeing spread through the industry, and we're using it on large enterprise deployments and working with customers to do their own work and support them in small and medium deployments as well. So right the way through our customer base, we're seeing the significant uptake of no and low code integration solutions.
So if we start thinking about some sort of delineation line, the one we've talked about, my little website, what we haven't thrown in there is the word legacy, mainframe, some of those older, gruntier, I guess, that's what I think of, the older technology. So if you've got an enterprise integration and you've got the mixture of legacy systems all the way through to these small power apps that any business person can whiz up with a bit of point and click, but you've got to integrate the power app to the legacy. Let's even use mainframe. Is that a job for low code, no code, or is this where the line of delineation, you sort of do a mixture of low code, no code, and the more old school code plumbing?
So generally, the more capable low-code platforms will be able to interface with legacy systems. So a lot of, it is a common business scenario to integrate with these steam-fired IBM mainframes that have been in the back of the company for 40 years. Everyone's a bit scared of touching. So it is a capability that has been built into a lot of these platforms, the ability to talk CSV files and talk flat files and talk legacy interfaces. It can also be that is a scenario where working with an integration specialist can help, not necessarily to deliver the integrations over it, but to provide guidance on the best patterns in which to interface with this legacy system. Possibly, as you say, we can use a delineation and put a facade or something over the top that basically exposes the legacy system in a fashion that is understandable to a low-code platform if the low-code platform doesn't have the particular technology capabilities to directly talk to it. Or it can be a case of just doing horses for courses and taking multiple approaches to interface with the legacy platform. But in a more complex environment where you have a mixture of legacy and modern platforms, it can be useful to put some integration guidance in place, and that's where the IT team can come in and work with the citizen developers and the people who are delivering on these low-code platforms and just put some guidance in place. Because although the business people know the business domain very well and they have an understanding of what they need to do and what the business process needs to be, it's not their job to need to understand the intricacies of these legacy platforms. So putting some guidance in place and saying when you're interfacing with the old mainframe, then we have built these interfaces, and if you use these interfaces, then you can put in your expense requests or you can put in your sales orders or whatever it is, and just making sure that everyone is there. Then that enables the low-code integration to be delivered by everyone in a consistent fashion without requiring the specialist to come in and do it for them. So they're just doing a bit of prep work and providing a bit of guidance, and that can enable the wider success.
Nice. So the word that really jumped out when you said it, this all come together for me, was work in a consistent way. So when I first heard the term citizen developer, and by the way, Chris Quill, if you're still listening, we're going to bring your question up. In fact, I'll pop your question up now so it's sitting there. So we'll come back to Chris Quill's question in a moment. Just to finish what I was saying there is, work in a consistent way, because if you go back to the days of consumerization of IT or shadow IT, when the marketing department would just run off and do something. If you now have every department and every person running off and doing something, then yes, that could create more headaches if they're not working to the same framework, and there's all sorts of things. So we're going to come back to the security question as well, which is sort of the next thing off the back of citizen developer, consumerization of IT, and the ability to give them a consistent framework so that here you go, not like low code, no code. Here's the framework. You just go for it with this. As long as you fit within it, it's going to be all fine and dandy. All fine and dandy. But we've got a great question from Chris Quill, and I've just looked him up on LinkedIn, and he is the Senior Product Development Engineer from Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. So little shout out there to you, Chris, and Winston Fong, who I haven't spoken to for a little while, and Zainab Maswala, who comes to AFQY, sponsored by Adaptive as well. So Chris's question, as you can already see, and probably had a good chance to think about it, that was the whole thing. Pop it up here so you can see it. How does this relate to RPA, robotic process automation?
Yeah, well, it very much is complementary to robotic process automation. So for people who don't know what robotic process automation is, robotic process automation is the ability to automate inputs into legacy systems by effectively emulating what a human would do if they were sitting there. So for systems that might not have an API, maybe they were created before API technology was even invented, they will have a green screen interface. And what robotic process automation does is it literally emulates someone sitting at a keyboard typing into a green screen interface. So that it will enter first name, tab, last name, tab, email, tab, enter, and by automating all of that, a new customer can be entered into the legacy system. So robotic process automation can very much dovetail with this, and you can go hand in hand. So it may be that the robotic process automation can expose an API, and then you can, when you're taking your customer or your lead out of Salesforce, you can send it to the robotic process automation API, and then the RPA platform will go and handle entering that into the mainframe for you by going and typing it in. And you can also go back the other way. So maybe an RPA process will extract data by typing in commands, bringing up a list of customers, scraping the screen results, and outputting that to a CSV file, which can then be picked up by the integration platform and processed. So it is a complementary technology set to the integration. Integration is based on system-to-system interactions, and RPA is based around emulating human interactions. So the two dovetail nicely.
Beautiful. And at that point, I'm going to leave this citizen development island to you guys. And I'm going to go back to the sales and marketing island where we don't have to deal with all of that because it got complex. No, I actually followed it. But what I was thinking is for those out there who are not technical or don't have the understanding of RPA separate to integration and was able to follow all of that, this is sort of, a good example at the delineation point of understanding. And I guess in some ways you might even say what you just talked about is quite simple if you've got your background. So I think this will grow where it won't be long with the likes of myself, business people, will be picking that information up and you're thinking of that productivity. So really interesting way how it dovetails and how the two work together, because as you say, RPA is all about emulating human behavior. So, we've just got another question pop in, so I'll bring that one up so you can have a look at that. I just wanted to, while you're having a look at Edwin's question, just come back to the framework that the technology team, integration experts might provide to citizen developers for interacting with legacy, whether it be mainframe or anything. Because the next question off that is security, right? So just to preface this, as soon as I heard about this, I was like, oh, well, security must be built into the low-code, no-code platform, right? It's all safe. It's easy. But not necessarily, and this is one of the dangers of citizen developers going off crazy without any sort of idea what they're doing. We could actually create some massive vulnerabilities. Could you speak to a little bit and give us a bit of an overview of security and how that should be looked at in a best case scenario?
Definitely. So obviously, as you say, security is the first and last thing that you need to be thinking about when you're looking at exposing your systems, exposing your data up for people to use, because not only does it enable business opportunity, but it also increases business risk, and we need to make sure that that is appropriately managed. So as part of exposing systems for use by citizen developers, or enabling citizen developers to make use of the capabilities of existing platforms, because a lot of platforms already provide this information these days, having a considered security approach is a definite requirement. So it's something that should be done in a measured process, especially in an enterprise situation. So as a given system or business area is opened up for use by citizen developers, so maybe you're going to say, okay, we're going to allow people to interface with Salesforce. We're going to flick the switch in their Salesforce settings to allow them to interact with all of the capabilities of the platform. There's both an education aspect and an aspect in terms of auditing the capabilities that are being enabled, because you want to set people up to succeed. You don't want to be putting your non-specialists in the situation where they are set up to fail. They shouldn't need to. Fire drill test, wonderful. A non-specialist shouldn't need to be cognizant of security. That is a specialist function and should be dealt with centrally. So you want to make sure you're setting up your citizen integrators to succeed by doing the analysis up front. It's much easier to close the gate before the horse bolts from a security perspective. No one wants to be the person on the news saying why all their data has been leaked. So taking a considered centralized approach when you are enabling systems, enabling only the data that is required to be integrated, and taking an education perspective where appropriate is the safest way to proceed from a security perspective.
Excellent. Just getting the last little note in there. I don't know if you hear the tapping. So that's really cool. I think the framework for engaging with the legacy system, you've got to have that specialist security person set it up so that it's a safe environment. Think about it. Where I walk my dog, they're just replacing the kids' playground at the school, and they're ripping up all the stuff that we were used to as kids and putting down all this rubber matting everywhere. Like, we used to fall off the jungle bars and break a leg or something. I didn't, but plenty of my mates did. Now they've got this, the amount of rubber going in there, so you're walking across it, it's quite bouncy. So essentially what they're doing these days is they're setting up a safe environment for the kids to play in the jungle bars, and if they fall off, it shouldn't mean a broken leg, just a few bruises and a few tears. Same sort of thing with security and engaging with the legacy, having it set up by the professionals so that there's a safe environment for the citizen developers to go, oh, what if we could do that? Or we'll go and do it. And ideally, I know it might be a little bit sales and marketing broad brush of me, but there's nothing that they can stuff up. They can go and play, and whatever they do stays internally, and that's safe and secure. So now let's have a look at Edwin Ashdown's question. So I met Edwin in Wellington last week. Leads digital for Harrison Grierson, I think on the client side. So engaged in doing lots of work with engineering and digital twins. His question is low code or no code a distillation of learned subject matter expertise?
Yes. So success in low code or no code comes down to your understanding of the subject matter that you are doing your integrations with. So by enabling the subject matter experts to deliver their own integrations, you are allowing the business specialists to deliver the correct business function rather than the developer's interpretation of the business function. So you're cutting one step out of the process. That's removal of one step of misinterpretation, and meaning that you really are getting the right people implementing the processes. So I think a distillation of the subject matter expertise is key to delivering successful integrations, and the advantage of low code and no code platforms is that you get the right people delivering upfront. You're not requiring it to be filtered through a developer who may or may not have that understanding and be able to correctly represent the business logic.
Yeah, no, that's we've got a new question I've just popped up there from Mr. Neil Forster, who's still got that amazing icon that he's had for years. Might need to get that updated, Neil, maybe not. But yeah, really read that one because what the discussion is about is probably quite a key part, because in the process of software development, there's someone like a BA that will take requirements, translate that into product backlog, into stories, and then developers will take those and turn them into, probably designers first will turn those into screens. They'll get signed off, and then they'll get developed off the back of that. So there's a bunch of people, a bunch of interpretation opportunities, whereas with low code, no code citizen developers, they actually do it, they make it, they are responsible for what they create for themselves, and therefore ideally they will create something. And it's interesting. I can't think of a good example, but I'm always amazed when I work or do something with my mates who don't have the background. Like, I've grown up around IT. I'm not a tech person like you, but I've grown up around IT, so I've got a great understanding of most things. And I expect to go and do it this way, and they'll come up with doing it a completely different way that looks arse about face on the surface, but then you realize it's just so direct, so for them it's perfect. They want to go from, let's just say A to D. They go from A to D, whereas I'll go from A to D. I'll go A, B, C, D, because I know the alphabet has those extra letters in between. Hope that analogy makes sense, but they're just cut and dry, direct to the point. That's what I want. That's what I'll get. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Actually, that would be a great hackathon one day. Let's put some citizen developers up against a team of people and see what gets produced. That would be quite fun. So now let's have a look at Neil Forster's question. So if I'm not wrong, Neil works with another one of your partners, Mulesoft, and right in this space, or at least I think so. So his question is, how do you maintain the long-term implications of citizen developers from an operational, delivery, and total cost perspective? You ask all the easy questions, Neil. But Philip, you got this one?
Yeah. So if we look at our approach, so if you've got a no-code developer, so this is the most business-appropriate integration tooling. So generally, that will be a business user solving their own problems. It might be, you've got a sales manager who just wants to get the data out of Salesforce and pull that down and put it somewhere that they can go and do some analysis against it. Those integrations, that are effectively personal integrations. Generally, we would see those as owned by the staff member. They're not delivering a wider business process. They're just scratching the itch, to use the terminology, and that would just be managed by the staff member. If you then look at use of low code to deliver integrations for the wider business, so this is where you are actually measuring this in terms of TCO. It's an integration, it's going to be long-standing, and it's going to be supported by the business. It may be delivered by business users, it may be delivered within the IT team. And from that perspective, looking at operational maintenance and TCO, it's all about knowledge capture. So when the integration is delivered, you need to make sure that the business process, the intent of the integration, that is captured and documented and available to support long-term maintenance from that perspective. The great thing,
documentation.
Oh, developers love documentation.
Yeah,
it's why we got into the industry, to write documentation. No,
and think about my documentation. Your documentation versus my documentation. I think I'd take your documentation any day over mine. So that's almost presenting the realities of the challenge. Like I talked about the my mate doing the A to D, whereas I go to A, B, C, D. It's a good example again of I doubt there'll be much documentation from a citizen developer, but you never know.
Yeah, well, it becomes a gate. If so, the demarcation is: are you solving a problem for yourself, or is this an integration that's going to be owned by the business? If it's going to be owned by the business, then part of handing that over to the business at the completion of delivery is going to be, you need to provide the information for the business to support this. So if you're going to walk away, hand this to the IT team to support indefinitely, the IT team needs to have the documentation to provide said support. Otherwise, they just go, no, I'm not accepting that. You have to look after it until you give me enough information to do so.
Yeah, that was me throwing it over the fence to you, but it's reverse camera, so I have to throw it that way. Well, actually, back in my days, this is a little bit obscure. Back in my first real job, I was an art director, and we had 4 computers, Pentium 133, for 6 designers. So we weren't allowed to get on the computer to do our design until our hand-drawn version had been signed off. And when I say hand-drawn, it was hand-drawn to the quality of a computer-drawn. Not quite, but it wasn't just scribble it down. It was actually draw out all the letters, the whole lot. So I used to hate it personally because I'd grown up on an era of computers. I was just like, wanted to get on and do it. But it was a great gate, as you say, to have everything thought through. And, they'd probably, it's almost starting to sound like the business case aspect. So having the business case, because you can't do all the documentation up front, because as you build something, naturally you're going to change it as you go. Ooh. I think they call that agile iterations. So yeah, but yeah, having some form of gate before and after to ensure that people can't just go willy-nilly, and it makes them think hard. It makes them think twice. So therefore, that's one way that citizen developers could actually be really productive for the business, rather than them running crazy, running amok, and breaking things and making a mess left, right, and centre. So we're just over time a little bit, and we've got to think of our audience. So we've still got a good bunch of people viewing, but what I wanted to do was invite you to think of your closing remarks. I know there's probably about 6 or 7 other questions we didn't quite get to, but we had a couple of pearlers there from Neil Forster, and if I scroll back, it was Mr. Quill, Edwin Ashdown, and Chris Quill. So thank you to all of those 3 people that gave us a live question in the go. And not sure if you can start to hear what the rains are starting to bucket down. And with that, I'd like you to hand over to you, Philip, to share your closing remarks on low code, no code integration.
Yeah, so I guess in conclusion, low code, no code is coming whether we want it or not, and we do want it because all of us, be it business users, non-integration specialists, or integration professionals like me, we can all make use of this technology to deliver faster and to deliver more reliably and to really enable everyone to participate in integration, which is key to business success these days. It is a environment where there are ever more systems in a business, and stitching them all together is key to success, and that's what integration does, and low code and no code is the best way we have to deliver that.
Excellent. And I'll just add on what you said earlier to that, is that it requires some frameworks around accessing legacy systems, and requires professional setup, and you use the term frameworks again, around security, so that a safe environment is created by the specialists for the citizen developers, and then some sort of gates to ensure that the citizen developers don't just go willy-nilly and build stuff here, build stuff there. They've actually got some gates which make them think twice about it and have some sort of documentation, so that when it's handed over, the service delivery team can actually manage it successfully. I won't go into it, but I was going to say, even in organisations, just even in the IT team, there can be situations where the innovation and development team build a whole bunch of stuff, chuck it over the wall to operations, and due to one thing or another, technical debt, not enough budget for the operations side, it gets broken or breaks and falls down, and of course they get blamed. No one actually looks at who built it and how it was built, and whether there's documentation, whether it was all done properly first. So won't distract from that, because those beautiful closing remarks, and I'd just like to say thank you once again for your time. Great subject. It looks to be the future of where things are going, as long as it's done properly, and we'll have a few bumps along the way as we work that out. And just want to say thank you to you and Adaptive, an annual partner for AFQY. 4 AFQYs, which has just been extended to 5, because we've got Christchurch this week, so that's an extra one. And 3 What the Tex, this is the second of 2. And of course, you'll see Christian Calbrick and Phil Cullen all over LinkedIn, engaging with clever remarks, supporting the industry with knowledge and expertise. So thank you very much for your time, Philip. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Cool. We'll close it up there. Have a good day, everybody. And thanks once again.
Thanks all.